Jim Haney, and thank you all for being here to enjoy him.
Allowing me to join this club and provide me thing. The images being projected here are images that have received medals in international photo salons. Steve Fisher has a lot more than I do. He's gotten several Vista shows and stuff like that over the years. And it will start on January 3rd. It runs from 12 noon to 3:15 every Tuesday for 8 consecutive weeks. And the first one is just getting to know your camera, learning the controls and modes, and getting familiar with your camera. And that's individual because everybody has different cameras. Okay? Then I spend a week on composition, which is designing your photos. And I get heavily into exposure and depth of field, which is the next 2 weeks. Then I spend 2 weeks on light, one observing and capturing it, and the second one, how to make it work for you or amending it. And I spend 2 weeks on editing. The first one where I go over the theory, and the second one where you actually practice one-on-one. I encourage people to bring their computers and their editing software in, and we actually work with you on your devices to edit your images. A lot of my basic students take the class more than once because they tell me by the end of the first class, they're understanding what I was talking about at the beginning. So that's not unusual. Matter of fact, I just had a gentleman that took my class last year as well as my intermediate class. And he signed up and took the basic class again this year because he was getting a new camera and he wanted to brush up on all these things. He actually brought his desktop computer in for the editing practicum. He has a 28-inch monitor, so he can really see when he's doing his editing.
Yeah, before you go further, Jim.
Yes?
Before you go further, what time was that class? I got the date, January 3rd. What time? Is that
The class starts at 12 noon
starts at 12 noon.
and runs till
Where is there?
3:15. It's at Bay Vista Summit. It's a big apartment complex on the top of the hill, about a half-mile east of Winco Foods.
Is there a cost for your class?
It's
Is there a
free,
cost? Free.
absolutely free. Bremerton Housing provides the space and the copies that I hand out. The basic class has about 30 sheets of information that are handed out throughout the class. The intermediate class has even more. And at the end of each basic class, I have the students give me feedback. And like last year, they were asking questions about cameras, lenses, and stuff like that. So when those types of things come up, I create more information that I hand out to everybody. And this is the basic class. And as you can see, it will be over February 21st. I actually get to take a whole week off, and then the Tuesday after that, my 12-week intermediate class starts. And it runs 3.5 hours a week for 12 weeks. And we go on field trips. The last 2 years, we've gone up to the Skagit Valley Tulip Festival. We've gone to Staircase. We can go to the zoo. We can get together and do all kinds of things. The guys and I got together last year and went up to Point No Point at 5 o'clock in the evening in early April and shot pictures there. And they shot, we had whales, we had otters, we had eagles, and seals. All of that was there when we shot it. The ladies and I went to Staircase and shot pictures there, and some of the wildflowers like the trilliums and stuff.
Jim?
We shot in natural habitat.
Jim, do you have those pictures with you?
I do, but I'm not going to show them today.
Tease.
I've got other pictures incorporated into this program. Here we go. Digital photography. Photography is an art and a science. It originated a little over 200 years ago when they started developing lenses and a way of chemically recording light on a more permanent medium. Digital photography became available to the public in the 1990s. And as time went on, it became more and more prominent. Digital photography became the dominant force of photography in the photography universe by 2005. That's when all your local photo labs and everything started printing things digitally. Even if you were still shooting film, they would develop the film, then scan it, and print them digitally.
Wow.
And Steve Fisher and I shot slides for decades before that, and used those for competition. But by this time, competition was going to digital projection. So this all came on. Ask yourself, why do I take pictures? For records, fun and family, keepsakes, competitions, exhibition, or artistic challenge. These are all very common ways people want to take pictures. You know, I mean, to do that for anything. And as many of those, or just one or two, if that's what you're interested in. This is a quick overview. I'm going to cover cameras, composition, exposure, lighting, and editing. Getting to know your camera. What is a camera? A camera is a tool used to record visual imagery. As with any tool, you get as much out of it as your tool and your knowledge of the tool allows. Just like your computer technology. You can get as wrapped up in that as you want, and the more you know, the more your tool is capable of, the more you can do. How many of you have smartphones? Okay, a good portion. Almost all of those, iPhones, Galaxies, all of those type of things, have built-in cameras. The sensors in those cameras are really small. And if those cameras are rated with megapixels, that means you're going to have a lot of image stored on that little teeny sensor in the camera. There is an artifact to that they give you more depth of field because of the way they are. And if you go in online, you can find free apps that will give you controls over aperture, shutter speed, and exposure compensation for those devices. And all of that is available online.
What do you search for?
What?
What do you search for? You know, so you can.
I would usually, the first search I would do is make exposure applications for your model phone.
Oh, okay.
You know, photo exposure applications, and it should bring up what you need. And it'll probably give you several different programs.
Yeah.
Okay. Terms you need to know. Shutter speed, apertures, ISO, which is sensor sensitivity, white balance. Things you need to know how to do with this, with any camera. Check and or replace batteries. Install or remove memory cards. Navigating your menus. And believe me, even your cell phone cameras and your tablet cameras have menus available. You have to know how to access those if you want to start taking control of your images. Okay. Shooting modes of your camera. How to shoot in different modes. Aperture priority, which is primarily for depth of field. Shutter priority, which is for if you're shooting a fast subject or a slow subject. Like if you're shooting a stream or a waterfall, you usually want a longer exposure time so the water appears kind of fluffy in your photo. Manual mode, where you assume full control of your image. You're setting the aperture and the shutter and the ISO, etc. for all those things. Know your equipment. No matter what type of equipment you have, you must know how to work with what you have. That's the very first thing. Knowledge and practice will provide you with the best results. And here's where it's important to be an observer of light. Be observant of the light and its characteristics. Work with it for the effect that you desire. Walk around and see what best camera angle gives you the best image. The camera angle and the composition are the maker's choices. Camera maintenance. This goes to any electronic device. With cameras, you never touch your lens. The lenses are coated with coatings to provide better optics and give you a clear image. If you touch the lens, your body oils will actually erode those coatings and degrade the image. So you clean gently only with lens cleaner and or lens paper or a soft lint-free cotton cloth or chamois or in nowadays microfiber cloths. Anything that will remove that dust without scratching your lens. If your camera gets damp, and again this covers any electronic equipment, immediately blot the moisture with absorbent material. Air dry at a room temperature. And you can use, if you do that promptly, you'll save your equipment. When you're storing your camera here for a long time, more than a week or two, put it in a cool, dry place with the batteries removed. What? Because no matter what kind of batteries you have, they will either deteriorate or some of them will disintegrate and actually corrode the contacts in your camera. So you don't leave them in for long-term storage. You always remove the batteries for long-term storage. It just depends on what kind of battery you have. Some are better than others. If you're using over-the-counter batteries, alkalines, or even rechargeables, you got to be really careful with those and remove them. Lithium batteries have a little longer shelf life, and they're not quite as dangerous, but they can be extremely dangerous. Overheat, explode, things like that. So you got to be careful of all that too.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Where's the best place to store the batteries?
Again, somewhere cool and dry where they're.
My father was an engineer, and he always made us store batteries in the freezer.
Yeah, well, I mean, those of us who are photographers and have film, I still have 80 rolls of slide film in my refrigerator. Okay? And I mean, this is left over from shooting slides for decades and decades. And when the industry started going digital, a lot of people that had switched over to digital found out that I was bored, and they sent me their old film, and I just had to store it either in the freezer or the refrigerator to keep it good. Okay, composition. This is the design of your photos. And my 3 rules are keep it simple, fill the frame, and watch your background. How many of you have seen pictures of people where they have tree trunks or telephone poles growing out of their head or shoulders? You gotta watch how you're designing the photo. Walk around to your camera angle that shows the subjects. Another first thing to do, is the subject vertical or horizontal? I shoot about a 50-50 mix of horizontal and vertical. Because a vertical subject, like one person or even 2 people, is usually a vertical subject matter. It fills the frame much better. Okay? If you shoot at a beach or something, and you're used to standing up and shooting straight from a standing position, a lot of times, if you're shooting a group of people in front of you, the horizon behind them will come right about the neck level, and it's really distracting. It makes it appear that the horizon is cutting off their heads. And this can happen with fences, anything like that. Another problem people have is they tend to lean sometimes. And I had one student that had like a 4 or 5 degree lisp on all of her horizontal shots. And one of the things photographers notice quickly is whether the horizon is straight or not. Because if the water is flowing out of the print, it's not going to do as well or damage. So you got to be aware of all that. Aspect ratios. The old cameras shot 4x5 and 8x10 negatives. Ansel Adams used to shoot with a big field camera with 8x10 negatives for a lot of his shots. And he shot at an aperture of f/64, which is really, really small. And so his exposures were 30 minutes, 2 hours long. One of my instructors at OC back in 1990 had interned with Ansel. And he said they used to spend 2 or 3 weeks spotting the giant prints that he'd make from those 8x10 negatives. And it was just part of the process back in those days. Now we do all that digitally. Okay, those images like your standard print formats. Okay, 5x7, 8x10, 11x14, 16x20 are all a 4:5 or 5:4 aspect ratio. That's what those papers developed from, and they've stayed with us in the English system. By the 60s and 70s, SLRs were popular, 35mm cameras. They have a 3:2 aspect ratio. So you have 4x6, 8x12, 12x18 prints from those sizes. You have to decide what size you're going to use. Digital cameras and digital projectors are usually set up for a 4:3 aspect ratio. So, and while you're designing your photos, you want to make sure all the key items in the photo, the lighting and everything, work together to make a good photo. Okay, this girl in the upper left was an image I shot at the county fair in 2013 in the pig barn. You can see the back end of the pig there. The top image is her shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio, which would be a 9:12 print. When I converted it to the standard print size that I can get made at Costco, I just squished it. And so instead of a 9:12, it's an 8:12. You can see how she looks thinner in the bottom image because it did that. Any of your family members or people that are run towards the heavier side, if you shoot them in a vertical format, you can make them look nicer. And by converting it to a 3:2 aspect ratio and please them more. These black and whites on the top, okay, this middle one here is a 4:3 ratio. That is what I shot it at. This one over here is the 3:2 or the 8:12. And this one over here is a 4:5 or 5:4 aspect ratio or 8:10. And I've had some people tell me they like this one best. Other people tell me they like this one best. But it just matters what you want to do. You can change these dimensions in digital photography. When you do change the dimensions or the proportions, the photos aren't accurate. Certain divisions in PSA, namely nature, photojournalism, and photo travel, require that you have a true image. In those, you have to maintain the proportions consistently. But you can crop to a size if you want to change the size of the print and fit that over that. This image here was shot from the back of the Bremerton Ferry. So it's departing Seattle. That's the 4:3 aspect ratio down here where I shot it. And this was converted into the 3:2 aspect ratio for a 12:18 print that was accepted at the Dual Fair. How many of you have heard the rule of thirds? Okay. You know that this is a general rule for art, and it covers photography as well. However, the rules are guidelines. They're never absolute, because you may have certain instances where you want to violate the rules. The rule of thirds is you divide the frame, whether it's vertical or horizontal, into thirds in each dimension. The focal point of the photo should be at one of those cross points. Okay? Yeah?
Say that again.
You divide the frame into thirds, both vertically and horizontally. The focal point of the ideal photo by the rule of thirds is that the focal point should be at one of those cross points,
You mean where they separate?
where they intersect.
Oh, okay.
So you have a nice
We'll get into it. I can go back. Okay. See this, the rule of thirds? The eyes are about the third line here. And the nose and whatever part of his face are the third line here. So my crash point is right here on his face. Okay. The other thing in composition are diagonals. We are English readers and speakers. We read from left to right. The most comfortable diagonal for us is from the lower left to the upper right. And that's the most soothing. If you have a diagonal going the other direction from the upper right to the lower left, or now it should be from the upper right to the lower left, from the lower right to the upper left, you have it going in the other direction for us. That just by being in that direction creates a little bit more tension. If you want the tension to be part of your photo, then that's good. If you want it to be comfortable for us to look at, then you want that diagonal in the other direction. However, if you're sending stuff to the Mideast or the Far East, they read in the opposite direction. So they're most comfortable with that diagonal being in the other direction. And in photography, we can flip the images as long as there's nothing that will make it look strange, like writing or something. You can flip it over and submit it in either direction to make the audiences or the judges happier. Leading lines. Leading lines are lines that take you into the picture. Probably one of the strongest is the S curve. And you've seen that it winds around the picture and takes you deeper into the picture. Another one is a nice C curve of a beach. It takes you from one area to the other into the picture. Another one is diminishing perspective, where you've got this path that narrows down and takes you into the picture. All those are considered leading lines. They're an important part of composition. Then you have shapes. Triangles are really solid shapes, and they're a great component in your composition. Circles, ovals, and rectangles can all be used. The main thing is that you want to work all these elements, balance each other, or complement each other in telling the story you're trying to tell. Exposure. We have 3 controls of exposure: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. How many of you shoot in auto? Most beginners do. Unfortunately, that will always give you an image. But your camera and its meter, no matter what it is, shift the exposure into the middle of the exposure range. If you're shooting in auto as a practice, fill your frame with something white and take a picture in auto. Then fill your frame with something black and take a picture in auto. Then fill your frame with something gray and take a picture in auto. When you look at those 3 images side by side, they will be almost identical because the camera puts everything into the middle. So it makes white gray, it makes black gray, and gray is gray. And people don't realize this, but every camera does this.
On auto.
On
On auto.
well, unless you make adjustments.
Right.
Okay, every meter is based on average exposure. Your camera pushes it into the middle to get an exposure. I've had students do this, try this experiment, and they had to add 2 stops of light, go plus 2 stops to make white look white, and minus 2 stops to make the black look black. And you don't realize this until you actually experience it. Even some of the photo clubs I was in, we used to do this with Polaroid film. Have a white, a black, and a gray, and they'd all come out the same because that's what your cameras and meters are designed to do. ISO is the sensitivity of your sensor. 100 is the traditional lowest ISO for your camera in most cameras. As you get in darker light conditions, you may need to bump this up, and it always doubles. It's 100, 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, 12,800, and even entry-level Nikon cameras go up to 25,600 for your ISO settings. You can set all that yourself. The problem is, as you bump up the sensitivity of your sensor, anything that's in the image is going to be magnified that many times. So you're magnifying it 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 times, whatever. And it makes what we call digital noise more predominant in your photos. In the old film days, you used to have ratings on your speed. Okay, you had 100 film, 200 film, 400 film, 800 or 1,000 film. Those were the ISOs. In film cameras, you couldn't change the ISO until you changed the roll of film. In digital, you have the freedom to readjust your ISO anytime you want or need. So they're much more flexible on that. Okay? Okay, shutter speed. This is the time the light is allowed in through your camera lens to your sensor. And it's essentially how long the light is going to register on your sensor. The rule of thumb on shutter speeds is you should not handhold anything slower than 1 over the length of the lens. So if you're shooting with a wide angle zoom and it's at 28 or 25 millimeters, 1/25th of a second or 1/30th of a second would be your slowest handheld shutter speed. If you're shooting with a longer lens, 1 over the length of the lens for the minimum shutter speed for handheld. When I'm sizing images, I start to work with the largest size I think I need and work down. Always save as. Prints should be saved at a resolution of 300 dpi for optimal quality. Top one is the original photo, and the bottom one I added an extra ticker to it because I like the effect that has. But those are just some of the things you can do in editing.
I think we all got a good taste of what we can learn about. Photography is such a wide open subject, and it's hard to cover all that, but Jim has done a fantastic job of bringing that